One might forget or not even be aware of this necessarily, given he's an obscure figure at this point. But a few years ago, Laurence Fox was kind of exploded onto the scene and was quite a big presence in the political commentary space for a while. And that was all unplanned. He sort of launched his political commentary career after a Question Time appearance, which unfortunately ended his acting career because he went on Question Time and espoused some. This was in the height of the cancel culture period, where the left wing kind of had their iron grip of power on the culture and were able to just run amok basically, and ending people's careers left, right, and centre. Left, right, and centre. Well, yeah, but and so he espoused some views which were, as far as I remember, very moderate. I mean, I haven't rewatched the Question Time episode to confirm that, but as far as I remember, he just espoused kind of normal, moderate, probably slightly right-wing, like centre-right opinions that these days anyone could probably get away with espousing. But at that time, that was enough to end his acting career, unfortunately. It's pretty sad and pretty absurd, really, when you look back on it. I mean, to be honest, in the industry he was in the arts, it's a left-wing dominated space anyway, so he was always at risk of ostracising himself from it by not falling in line with the politics of that sphere. But so after that launched his political commentary career. He was, as I said, he was big for a while in that space. He was doing the political podcast circuit. So yeah, he was really big for a while, and it shows how weird things were at that point. A few years back in the height of that politically frenzied period we were in. Because the reason he exploded as he did and became such a big figure on the political scene is because he espoused, moderate, normal views that most people, or many, many people, would deem completely uncontroversial. And just doing that at that time was enough to, kind of, launch you into this position of being a sort of political rock star. It was like, I mean, Jordan Peterson kind of exploded for similar reasons, actually, because if you go back and look at the views he was espousing when he became famous, they were all mostly extremely moderate, like centrist, normal views on things. And he was treated as a far right extremist for espousing those moderate opinions and giving advice that was to normal people completely uncontroversial. It shows how weird things were at that time. They're weird now in a different way, but but that was worse in that specific regard, and in many other ways, I think. But so anyway, what's the point of this? Well, I think it's just interesting to kind of track Fox's career after getting into the political space and where he's at now, because obviously I deem him as kind of a tragic figure, really, because, as I said, he lost his acting career and moved into the political space out of necessity after that. And he was, in retrospect, I wonder if maybe because he'd never, as far as I know, he'd never planned to get into politics. He did it, as I say, out of necessity, because that's just where circumstances took him, really. He needed to find some line of work after being ostracised from the acting world. And so I wonder if, he was maybe a bit out of his depth, to be honest, and that may be partly why he kind of succumbed to this path of what's essentially kind of radicalisation, alas. I mean, after bursting onto the scene as he did, the political scene, he his career in that space has essentially been a sort of escalating path of radicalisation. And I use radicalisation a bit, like, that might be a slightly excessive word, because, he's not like some kind of terrorist or whatever, but he has become radicalised, essentially. He just became more and more extreme in his views and in his rhetoric, particularly, over time. And it's a shame, because if you look at his career as an actor, before he was forced into the political space, he seemed like a pretty chilled out, likeable, nice guy on his appearances in interviews from back then, and when he appeared on TV shows and stuff. Yeah, he seemed like a pretty laid-back dude, a pretty relaxed fella. And even at the start of his career in political commentary, he was even, still maintained that persona for a while then. But as I say, over time, he just got pushed to being more and more extreme. And you can sympathise with it, really, because he was firstly, being ostracised from acting for espousing perfectly reasonable views is, outrageously unfair, obviously. So you can see why that would have kind of planted a seed for his later radicalization, to use that word lightly again. Yeah, I don't like saying he's been radicalized. It does sound hyperbolic, but I don't know how else to describe it at the moment. I mean, that is essentially what happened. So yeah, you can understand how he got pushed down the path he ended up going down, and obviously he ended up as a host on GB News for a while, and then got fired from that job for making unpleasant comments about Ava Santina, which he afterwards he did actually apologise for, and as far as I remember, he gave a pretty good apology for it actually. But then subsequently, he sort of, he didn't retract his apology as such, but he did. I have seen him subsequently say that he actually doesn't regret the remark he made. And to be honest, I think his apology initially would have been genuine. I mean, he said in that apology he knew he was getting fired either way from GB News, but he was apologising because he actually thought it was the right thing to do. But I think he no longer feels sorry, because once you've been kicked out of once you've been completely ostracized by your in crowd, his new in crowd at that time, which was GB News, after being kicked out of his old in crowd in acting. Yeah, I mean, I guess why would you feel? It's easy to feel pretty bitter at that point, isn't it? And you can understand why he wouldn't really be feeling particularly apologetic after that, because clearly apologizing gets you nowhere. That's the experience he would have undergone, And then and now he's at the point where he is now, where I said radicalization was a bit hyperbolic, but I mean he ended up getting arrested for I think advocating people vandalise ULEZ cameras, which advocating for vandalism is quite an extreme thing to do, and it's perfectly reasonable to oppose ULEZ cameras and campaign for them to be legally taken down, but it's unwise to advocate people go out and vandalise them. So he has kind of become his own worst enemy, and there's a point at which after that as well, I think he got in trouble with the police again for something. I think it was I want to be careful with. I do remember what it was. Because I don't have the information to hand. I want to be. It was something to do with some Twitter post about another female political commentator, and I don't want to give the details because I don't remember them exactly, and I don't want to feel like it would be irresponsible to sort of inaccurately describe what happened there, but you can look into it yourself. Yeah, so he's become his own worst enemy at this point, and there is a point at which you have to slightly run out of sympathy and say, obviously, you can empathise with the fact that he's been kind of pushed down the path he's gone down by the kind of mad political moment he emerged from as a political figure. But, there's a point at which he's an adult and he needs to sort of take accountability for his own behaviour, really. Anyway, so where is he now? Well, he's, like I mentioned earlier, he's a pretty obscure figure at this point. He has tanked his career completely, it seems. He has a YouTube channel called Reclaim the Media, and it's got quite a lot of subscribers. It's got 132,000 subscribers. However, the views are pretty pitiful. I mean, for a channel of that size, the views are very, very low indeed. He averages just a few thousand views per video. I realise there's a slight irony, me pointing that out, given this video is on a new channel that doesn't have any viewers at the moment. But even so, I'm just stating the facts. I don't know if it's his channel entirely, or if it's a joint channel with him and what's that guy's name? The other guy who was fired from GB News, Calvin Roberts, is it? Let's just Google it. Calvin Robinson, yeah, because he does regular podcasts on the channel with Calvin Robinson. So I don't know if it's a joint channel they have together, or if it's just Fox's and he has Robinson on as a guest frequently. But yeah, they do a regular podcast on there, it seems. And yeah, I skimmed through the most recent episode earlier just to check out what the content's like, and yeah, it's pretty dull, to be honest. It's not very interesting. So yeah, which makes me kind of reiterate my point that I think Laurence Fox, I think he's a smart guy, and I think he has some valuable insights, but I don't think he's a massively interesting commentator. Again, I think most of his prominence was gained by the fact that average, normal people who felt like they were having their speech and opinions suppressed by the kind of tyranny of the left-wing extremism that was dominating the culture at that time. I feel like, people were just fascinated or kind of drawn to him based on the fact that he was just a normal person like them, espousing the kinds of opinions they had and weren't allowed to express themselves. And so I think that's how he became prominent. And now that cultural moment we're in has passed, he doesn't have that much to offer anymore, I don't think. And not only that, but he has just done so much damage to his public image with his own behaviour, quite frankly. So I think people have kind of grown tired of his antics, and so don't really pay much attention to him because of that. So that's it. Yeah, he's kind of just burnt out. He has torched his career, alas, it seems. There's not much interest in him anymore. And to reiterate what I said already, it is a shame, and I do deem him as kind of a tragic figure at this point, because his career in acting was destroyed for no good reason. It was totally unreasonable that he was ostracised from the arts, and so getting into politics, he was probably, he has political opinions, as everyone does. However, that doesn't mean everyone's suited to being politically involved or to being a political campaigner or commentator. That's only some people are cut out for that, and it's a fairly kind of select class of people. Although there are many people who are in that space professionally who are not cut out for it as well, and yet they have successful careers regardless of that fact, but that's a separate point. Yeah, so it's a shame. So yeah, he's kind of had this tragic downfall. Yeah, I have sympathy for him for that, but what can you do? It is what it is. But what do you think of Laurence Fox? Were you ever a fan of his? Are you now? What do you think of his whole evolution and eventual destruction of his career? It's a sad thing. It's a sad thing that's what the sort of cultural mania of several years ago led not only him but various other figures to the point of. So, but anyway, yeah, let me know what you think about that. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe for more videos on this kind of thing and cultural topics, political topics generally. Bye.